Hello, everyone, and thank you for making the time to attend my session today. My name is Verghese Kocheman, and I will be talking about Executive Eye, a stakeholder management platform. This is my first time presenting in a PWE event, and I'm super excited. So let's get started. A little bit about myself. I'm a solutions architect with Executive Eye. I'm a PMP with more than 15 years experience. My passion is to transform project plans and reporting for executive consumption. My primary focus is on linear projects and visualizing timelines. If you want to learn more about myself, you could search my LinkedIn profile. Just search for Verghese Kocheman. My presentation today is outlined as follows. I will first describe the business pains that the executive stakeholders go through, which led to the development of Executive Eye. And then I'll elaborate on how does Executive Eye deliver its services. And this will be followed by some demonstrations that highlight the value of Executive Eye. Let's talk about the business pains that led to the development of Executive Eye. Let's profile an executive for a moment. These are folks that have got 101 things that are running through their minds at any one time. They're responsible for a lot of stuff. And they don't have much time to get to the bottom of things where they can intervene and resolve the issues. So you can imagine their frustration when they're given a 100-page progress update report, or they have to sit through a half day or a full day's progress update meeting. To make matters worse, these progress reports and update meetings are full of KPIs and jargons from a controls perspective that they may not be familiar with. Worse, most of these perspectives are presented as is because the reports are generated from the core applications. The stakeholders are expected to connect the dots mentally. It's important to note that the executives are from a right here, right now work culture. They want to be involved. They want to know when things are going wrong so that they have the earliest window of opportunity to intervene. And it's also important to note that this class of stakeholders also have their audience that they have to conduct briefings for. And the present artifacts that they are presented with often fall short. And also very important to note that when they conduct their briefings, it is not necessarily always in a boardroom or a meeting room. The stakeholders that they have to conduct their briefings may be only available in a cafe or a restaurant or a golf course. So this content has to be available for them to whip out at a moment's notice. Very important to note that Executive Eye was designed by executives and specifically for the consumption of executives. Now, bringing all this content as is half the battle. The other half is to enable or empower the stakeholders to quickly connect the dots by merging the context of these different data feeds together. When there is a new executive entering a project, it's important for them to come up to speed quick. They need to understand what is the scope of the project, what are the designs that have been made so far, what are the plans in terms of schedule and costs, how is it tracking in terms of performance when you see the S-curves, what are the issues, what are the action plans that the project management team has put in place, are they effective, are they working? Do they need to intervene with their executive powers to get things back on track? And what is the forecast of how the remaining scope is going to be completed? So Executive Eye's task is to merge the context of these different data feeds so that the executives can connect these dots quickly. Another aspect is to be able to provide the ability to this class of executives to pick and choose what content they want to present to which audience and using what device. Executive Eye allows the users to select the type of content, and this content can be delivered through a web browser or through a mobile device. Typically, it uses a touchscreen TV or even Surface Hub. For the remainder of this presentation, I will be demonstrating some of the use cases on which Executive Eye can be used. This will range from fixed asset projects to linear assets, some techniques on visualizing timelines, and finally, I'll be presenting a use case on how to conduct a shutdown. Upon successfully logging into Executive Eye, you'll be presented with a geospatial map. In this case, this map is powered by Google Maps. Now you have the ability to zoom in and out, and you will find different project icons in different locations. So this is another location, you can cluster that, and this is another type of project. This is a linear project. I'll get back to that shortly. Another view that we have is called the portfolio view. You can create a portfolio and add the projects that you want into that portfolio. Executive Eye has also got 3 portfolios that it generates automatically. One's called the schedule variance, the second one's called cost variance, and the third one is schedule and cost. So whenever you click a particular portfolio, you see the list of projects that are members of that portfolio. So if I were to click on the Simple Weld water treatment plant project, it will navigate me to that particular location. So when you do click onto a particular project, you will pop out a series of menus, one of which is called the site content. The site content will bring forth all the GPS tagged albums. Now these albums can contain a variety of information. For instance, this particular album talks about the concept design behind this water treatment plant. It's a video that describes how the water is going to get treated in this treatment plant. You can open up the 3D model of this particular asset, and you can bring this asset and make it bigger, and you can navigate this asset by zooming in and out, going into the various portions if you want to describe them. You can move the contents around to suit the audience that you're presenting to. Now let's look at the site content. The site content is an album that contains all the all the photographs and videos taken for that particular GPS location. It keeps a record, it's time-stamped, and it comes with a narrative. So in essence, when you scroll through the contents of this album, you're able to see the evolution of that particular project site. And you can hold a variety ranging from photos, videos, even time-lapse videos. Talking about time-lapse, let's open up the third or the fourth album here. And this is a time-lapse video describing how the asset construction has been taking place so far. Similarly, you can even bring up a Power BI dashboard on the project to say how the project's performance reports are looking like. So as you can see, there are many different types of information that can be aggregated from various sources and brought onto the same canvas. So let's see how do you merge these different contexts together and bring them for presentation to the stakeholder. By clicking on the project details menu item, you get a carousel of cards offering different perspectives of the project. We'll go back to the scorecard, the first card on the screen. And what this particular card does is it brings together various different sources of information to enable the stakeholder to come up to speed quickly. So on the top you have the announcements. You can click into that. You can see all the various announcements made on the project. Then you have the physical curves progress in terms of schedule, actual, and what's the variance. They're color coded. Similarly for financial, you have the schedule, actual, and variance. You have all the change orders in terms of extension of time. You can click into that to see what are the extension of time records and how many days was given in extension for each of those records. Similarly for variations, what are the variations and how much was awarded. Next you have the combined S-curve between physical and cost, And as you move between each month, you get to see what these values are. You also get to turn on or off the different curves. So let's say I want to now focus on only the actuals. I can turn off all the other curves, and then I can see what is the performance and the variance between the plan and actuals in terms of actual physical and also the actual costs. If you scroll down below, you get to see what is called the Executive Eye Generated Project Summary. This is a summary narrative that is generated by Executive Eye for this particular project. This is meant for stakeholders who are more tuned to reading narratives than to sit down and try to figure out what all these different charts are telling them. Then you have the contract track that tells you what's the original contract amount, what are the VOs that has been applied, so what is the revised amount, how much has been spent, and how much is remaining. Similarly, for the contract dates, you have the start and finish, and coupled with the extension of time given, what is the new finish date, what's the duration, and what's remaining. So in essence, the stakeholders get to come up to speed in a pretty short time, in what we term as executive time. Executives don't have much time to focus, so they need to come up to speed in very short, rapid periods of time. So with a tool like Executive Eye, and bear in mind this particular contents are also available from your mobile phones natively for iOS and Android. So they're able to get up to speed on their projects pretty quickly and with a pretty rich interface. So now let's move on to the example of a linear project. So I'm going to open up the portfolio and I'm going to select the Ho Chi Minh City. So if I were to zoom out, you can see that there is a line that is traversing the path of that project. So that's the linear path of the project. And you can actually click into a particular project. In this case, you got two different work packages, and they all come with their own GPS tagged albums. So if I were to look at the site content of this particular work package, you can have a quick GPS view of what's happening in this particular location. Note there's a timestamp and there's a narrative. So stakeholders actually get to see the evolution of that particular site quite effectively using this GPS tagged albums. So similarly, for a linear project, you can go through different sections of that MRT. In this case, it's an MRT project. You can go through the different sections and see how things have evolved over time. So this is the building of the station. So in essence, yes, as what I showed in the Simple Well project, you get to see location-based progress. You also get the same carousel cards. Only difference is that you're going to see the project information for that particular project itself. Now, you get the same things here. You get on a different work package level, you get a different performance chart. Now I'm going to introduce you to now what we call the timeline visualizer. The timeline visualizer is something that allows you to tick through the timeline of the project and see what is supposed to be the baseline plan versus what has actually been delivered. So in this particular map, it's the same Ho Chi Minh City MRT project. The only difference is that we have put in the actual GPS location of each pier, and now you can traverse the path based on the pier locations, and the pier numbers are the ones that are showing on the screen. So it's a quick way to see where the construction activities are going to be located at, and you can get a pretty good 3D helicopter view of that location. Now as you zoom in, you'll actually get to see the structure of that particular pier, and the structure also gives you the various components of that pier, starting from the piling, the pile cap, you can actually see the various components. Now, if you followed a planning standard that we use, where the activities are coded to the component of each peer, then you would be able to do the simulation. So I'm just going to run, over here is the timeline of the project. I've paused it at this particular date. So I'm just going to now activate that time, let it run. So here you start seeing the different color codes of the components coming up. So based on your baseline of this project, it's saying that blue denotes that these components should already have started its construction, but it hasn't. So let it run some more. And now it turns into red, and the next component turns to blue. So in essence, red means that the component should have finished by now, but it's not even started. And the component above it, which is, the first component is a piling, the second component is a pile cap. The component on pile cap is now supposed to be in progress, but that hasn't started. So we are able to read this information directly from Microsoft Project, color code it, and show what's the actual progress compared to the baseline. If you see a orange, that basically means work in progress, and when the job is completed, you would actually see the component turn white, which means that the job is completed. So you can see a pretty good view of how late a project is by just observing the color codes of the different components. Now you can actually also see how the project is going to unfold as a forecast, and you can see more clearly. For an executive, this is something that is much more easier for them to comprehend and rapidly absorb the performance of the project. Now this is another example of how to visualize a timeline using a 3D bar chart. In this example, I'm using a shutdown operation at a factory, and as you know, whenever there's a shutdown, there's a loss in production, which means a loss of revenue. So you really need to plan your work quickly. Plan your work really thoroughly to minimize the shutdown time so that the losses are minimized. But in a Gantt chart, it's kind of hard to visualize the different sequence of activities happening at the different work fronts. So this is another view that allows a pretty good perspective on reviewing what are the activities that are coming up or going to be performed on an equipment. So let me set the stage here by walking you through the different axes. The x-axis here represents the different equipment. The y-axis represents the timeline. The blocks represent the different activities that are going to be happening on that equipment and at that date. The y-axis denotes the count of activities that are going to be happening on that equipment and at the same date. So in this example, you can see that there are two activities happening on the performance tester. They're both having different activity IDs. So it gives you the chance to review your plan to see whether was that by design or was that a mistake? And if it was a mistake, you got the opportunity to fix that before actually executing it. A little bit about the color codes. If the color codes are not replicating, it means they are distinct activities, they are different activities. But in this case, you can see the red blocks, they are both the same color, which means that there are two, this activity it's one activity that is spanning across a duration of 2 days for this particular equipment. Now, as you let the timeline tick, you will actually start to see the progress of what is happening on this particular shutdown project. You can see a day-by-day breakdown of how much was the planned outage and what was the actual outage. And in the course of execution, if there are any issues that come up, it should get recorded, because you could use this use case to not only review a baseline for execution, you also get to track its progress while it is in execution. And also, more importantly, you get to go back and play it back to see what were the issues that came up on this different equipment, so that you can take mitigative action for the next planning of the shutdown. So just going to run this timeline and see how it moves across. Now, as the timer ticks through the duration of the project, different activities for the different equipment will get loaded. And you'll be able to also observe what is called the white space between these activities. For instance, on the electric generator, you can see one activity here, but the next 2 days there are no activity, followed by an activity, 3 activities happening at the same day for that equipment. So if you're looking to investigate wastage, so this is a very quick view that will give you an indication of how much wastage you have in your plans and whether it is a real waste in terms of perhaps it had real float, in which case there is no real impact. But if it was a wastage that is created because of a shared resource constraint, then these are the kinds of insights that you can actually quite clearly decipher when you see your Gantt chart or timeline visualized using this 3D chart. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. So let's have a quick recap of what was just presented today. I walked you through the business pains of what typical executives face when they see project progress reports and sit through long progress update meetings, and shown you how Executive Eye retrieves information from various sources. It merges the context so that the executives can build a pretty accurate model of the performance of their projects. Now, in the case of Executive Eye and Microsoft Project Online, the integration is seamless. The planner doesn't have to do anything more other than follow the initial planning standard that Executive Eye uses to retrieve the information and do the visualizations that I've shown earlier. So Executive Eye and Microsoft Project Online works pretty much seamlessly, and there is no additional effort that needs to be put in order for Executive Eye to pull this information in and do that necessary transformation and deliver the visuals. For further information, please feel free to go to the official website of Executive Eye at www.executive-eye.com. And thank you very much for attending my session.